Referential communication is also important to pragmatics. Taran and Searbairn, they chose to study how learners use language resources to signal new and given information in a certain context. And they concluded that effective referential communication is essentially interactive. It develops during the interaction, and it is important for the successful communication. Because unless you understand the references given by the speaker, you will not be able to understand the communication or the message which is being sent by the speaker. So therefore, therefore the researchers inform us that we need to understand any information the listener already has about what we are talking about as a speaker, and we also need to know that what a listener needs more to know in order to understand the message which is being communicated. So in order to convey or to conduct a successful referential communication, we need to take care of these factors about the knowledge and about the possibility of further knowledge about the listener. An interactive feature of conversation reference entails pragmatic meanings, because those meanings do develop during the conversation or in a certain context. We might have seen in our daily talk as well that a certain piece of language might develop different meanings in different situations. Even some very traditional metaphors or proverbs may be used differently in different situations. So therefore, the references do take new meanings or different meanings in different situations, and we might say that they sometimes do develop their meanings during an interaction, and they may be interactive in nature. It is also an aspect of language use that depends on careful decisions by the speaker regarding the linguistic forms. What he chooses to represent a certain reference is an important decision in a communication, because that decision may have a serious bearing on the success of a certain communication. For example, you can see this in front of you. If a speaker asks a listener to pass the book when there are several books on the table, it becomes unclear which of the several books the speaker is referring to. In this situation, the speaker assumes that the listener has enough old or given information in the context to know which book the speaker wants to examine. Usually we assume in such situations the speaker would assume that the listener whom he or she is asking about the book would already know that which book he or she is asking. This could probably be the book they were discussing a while ago, or could be a book the speaker has been reading for some time and listener knows about it. So there must be certain clue in the mind of the listener about that book, and which speaker knows. That's why he's relying on that reference. He's asking the listener to give him or pass that book. However, in some cases where L2 learners of English, particularly if the primary language does not include a subsystem of indefinite and definite articles, for example, a, an, and the, and sometimes that or this, as English does, they may not have enough pragmatic knowledge of English to understand which linguistic form is needed in this case. For example, if you as a native speaker have a language other than English, and your language doesn't have the same use of definite or indefinite articles or the determiners as English has, there would be a possibility that some pragmatic problems would arise in the communication. Because as a listener, as a native speaker uses such articles or determiners in their communication, they may not be possible to be easily interpreted by the non-native speakers of the language. I'll give you another example from some academic speech event or a situation. This situation is about about some international students and their native advisors in some American university. So Badawi, Harling and Hartford, they conducted a study on the status preserving strategies in such situations, how the advisor and the advisee employ various status preserving strategies during their conversation. This is a typical education setting where the pragmatic knowledge of both the native speaker and non-native speakers are being tested. And they came to the conclusion that highly proficient non-native speakers may lack the ability to negotiate an advisory interview that is dependent on appropriate speech acts and communication strategies. They may not understand the clues which are embedded in that communication or the references which are being provided in that communication. Therefore, their attempt to preserve status would end in a failure. In this study, the important issue was to look into the impression management, and which is important to graduate students who seek to be well regarded by their advisors. And in such situations, if you become too assertive, you might invite some negative repercussions. For example, if the international student in a different cultural setting becomes too assertive, just because of his lack of pragmatic knowledge, he might invite negative repercussions for him or herself in future. In such discussions, both participants should perform the expected roles for both students and advisors, using status preserving linguistic forms and appropriate timing of their turns at talk. They should wait for each other's turn, and there would be multiple other factors which will contribute to the status preserving strategies. The researchers concluded that learners of L2 illustrate are less than successful enactment of pragmatic meaning. They were not able to understand that what they are saying may be assertive or may be offensive in certain situations, or may not convey the same pragmatic meaning as they were intended by themselves. Let's have a look at this brief discussion which starts from the middle of this page. Speaker A says, which is the advisor, "Do you know what you want to do?" Student says, "More or less." And this is quite a strange answer in this situation. Then advisor says, "Let's hear it. You have done 530, 31, 34. He's probably referring to the courses the student have done. "So you probably want to do 542, I bet you." So he's referring to the course again. Student says, "Yes, that's phonological." And advisor says, "Yes, phonology." So you could see some kind of miscommunication or wrong communication of pragmatic meanings is being highlighted in this example. So in short, we could conclude that pragmatic understanding of a certain communication also relies heavily on the referential communication, or the success of the referential communication which is being conducted as a part of that communication.